As we say goodbye to 2012, American Black Journal can't help but want to look back at those stories that dominated the headlines and give some light to the ones that should have garnered a little more attention. Sit back and relax. We're going to go back through the year that was and look forward to the year that will be. And is the mainstream media missing some of the racial implications of stories like right to work and emergency manager legislation? It's all coming up on American Black Journal.
Lindsay wants to know.
So I'm curious, what's DTE Energy doing to improve their customer service?
Why don't we take a ride over there and let Rachel tell us? Hello.
Hello. Take a walk with me. Here at DTE Energy, we're working very hard to improve our service, like answering every call under 1 minute and resolving the issue on the first call.
Wow, no passing the buck, huh?
Nope. And plus, we're adding over 100 customer service jobs right here in the state of Michigan.
I need to get a real job.
I'm going to send your application.
Thanks, Rachel. DTE Energy. Know your own power.
Welcome to American Black Journal. For years, my next guest and I have debated the issues of the day privately. So when I knew he was going to be in Detroit for the holidays, I thought it'd be great to have him on the show for a little more public exchange of ideas. He's an associate professor of political science and Africana studies at Johns Hopkins University. He's a popular commentator on TV and radio, and most importantly, of course, he's my former classmate from the University of Michigan. I'm happy to welcome the Detroit native, Dr. Lester K. Spence, to American Black Journal.
Oh,
good to see you, as always.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I thought it'd be really great to have you here is that you're from here, like I am. But you've been away a lot longer, in fact, than I have, and you keep up with what's going on around here. I thought, that outsider's perspective, but an outsider who's really an insider would be really good. So I'm glad you're here. Thanks for doing this. Let's start with right to work, which is something I know that you've been really paying attention to. That came out of our lame duck session here, and they really rammed that through, and the governor signed it after telling lots of people, including me, that it wasn't on his agenda. What's your take on that?
So first, to scope out, you scoped out some of the politics, right?
Yeah.
So he runs on a different platform, to be a uniter, not a divider.
Right.
And he goes against that, right? So one of the things, democracy really works best when you have a couple of things. One is where you've got people who are kind of running either on what they did or what they plan to do.
Sure, right.
That's
Honesty.
Honesty, right? And then people can make a choice.
Right.
The second thing is that when you've got an issue that's being debated, it's actually debated in the public.
Right.
Where if it's just something that occurs within the legislature, the various houses can kind of hash it out and then make a decision. Right. Both those things.
We didn't have either of those here.
We didn't have either of those things
That's
here.
right.
And because of this third dynamic, so we just reelected President Obama, but what nobody's talking about is the fact that I think 47 out of 50 states have one party running
everything. Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And over half of them, I believe, have veto-proof majorities.
Right.
And I believe Michigan's one of them.
Michigan's one of them. We have it in the Senate, close in the House.
Yeah. So you've got those three things together, and then you layer on that the American Legislative Exchange Council,
which
is this,
which wrote the legislation.
Which wrote the legislation.
Yeah.
Corporate funded, wrote the legislation, word for word duplicates of legislation passed in every other state. So before we talk about the racial implications, it's important to lay out the entire scope.
Political implications here stink too, is your point.
I mean, so even if there were, so one could argue, I wouldn't necessarily agree, but one could argue if he runs on this, he runs on right to work, they have a full debate, then and they came up with the idea themselves, then it's like, man, these have really bad racial, but it's legitimate, But now it's like you can make a claim that this actually is illegitimate, and then the racial implications make it a bit more complicated.
And so talk about what you see those racial implications as being. Is it that this is a reaction to a black man getting a second term in the White House for the first time, or is it more local from the way you see it?
Well, it's a national thing, but it's not fully related to Obama's reelection.
Okay.
Right. It's in there, but it's not fully in there. So there are a few different labor divides that Michigan's wrestling with, that
Right.
we're all wrestling with,
Right.
that Michigan's really wrestling with. One labor divide is unemployment, employment.
Right.
We know rates of black unemployment are a lot higher than
Are huge, especially in Detroit.
Especially in Detroit, right? But the other thing is labor, unlabor, right?
Okay.
So the gap between blacks and whites as far as labor, as far as being in labor unions, isn't sizable, but it is there. Blacks are more likely than whites to be members of labor unions.
Right, and blacks who are part of shops where there's collective bargaining tend to do better. I mean, their economics are way better than people who are not in those shops.
Yeah, and we haven't said that. So one of the things that's important to note is that people in right-to-work states tend to make less money.
Sure.
And tend to be more likely to work if they do in jobs without benefits.
Without benefits, that's right.
Right.
That's right.
So then the other thing is the good job, bad job divide, where a bad job is like your Walmart job, which is really, really a lot of labor anxiety. You don't have benefits. You work kind of when you do, and you have little to no wages.
Right, and you have no leverage. I mean, they come fire you for any reason at any time. That's right.
Exactly. So blacks are at the bad end on all those divides, right? So that's one of it. So when you're talking about the material implications of passing right-to-work legislation, black, to the extent you can make a difference, you can distinguish between how black people and white people fare.
Right.
Black people are going to fare.
So this is going to hit black
Thank
black Michiganders much harder than white ones.
Yeah, it's going to hit black. That's why you're on TV and I'm not. So yes, black people are going to get hit a lot harder.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is how is the legislation passed and articulated? Right. So that's where we really see the racial implications.
Yeah.
Where the reason something like this is able to get passed is in part because it's easy to paint this picture of black lazy workers.
Oh, sure.
Right?
In unions.
Right. So the union becomes racialized, even though we know that in a state like Michigan, a lot of whites get benefits from
far more white people in the unions in Michigan.
Far more whites, right? But when you can paint that picture of that lazy union worker and make that worker black, then all the people outside of the metropolitan Detroit area, and then a sizable percentage of people within the metropolitan Detroit area are going to easily say, you know what, no, we need to give people more power to fire.
And put that in the context of some of the other debates that we're having. I mean, this didn't happen in a vacuum. We're also arguing over governance in the city of Detroit through this emergency manager law, which got repealed, and then we had a surrogate in there. There are lots of things. I mean, all of these things sort of play together, right?
Yes, it's all part of the same. And you can even talk about the concealed weapon legislation that he vetoed. That he did veto.
Yes,
he
finally this week he said he couldn't. He had no choice there, right?
That's
there's
right.
no way you can do that after Connecticut.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's all part of a piece. So what we're having, so if you take the municipal management issue, right? So in 2011 is when the emergency, the legislation was passed.
Right.
Now the thing is these cities have been hit really, really hard by the economy.
Sure.
Right? I mean, been hit tremendously hard by the economy. And back in the day, like particularly in the 70s, cities would get a combination of revenue sharing from states,
from the states and the
federal government, right? So the federal government removed most of that stuff.
And the state did
and
too.
then the state did too. Snyder reduced it, right? So what we have is a scenario where the cities who most need help to deal with management issues are forced to be entrepreneurial.
Right.
So cities who can't manage their own stuff, they should be placed under receivership.
Right.
And then the racial implications is that black populations are concentrated
in those cities.
And cities really hit hard by the economy.
So when we say racial implications, we're not saying that somebody's sitting around plotting to do black people in through right to work or the EFM law. What you're saying really is that these are disparate impacts from policies that people don't think about what the racial impact might be. We don't talk about it. The media doesn't cover it that way. So it's just sort of something that happens, but that doesn't make it any better.
Well, it's not. Well, I want to complicate that a bit.
Okay.
It's not just. It is something that has disparate impacts, and it's not something about people planning and plotting. at least not in general.
Right.
But the optics are important.
Right.
Right. We make political decisions not just based on material realities, but based on symbolic realities.
Right.
Right. So if you've got these symbols, and if you attach these black bodies to these symbols.
Right. So the union being sort of a representation of black labor.
Yes.
The city being the representation of where blacks live.
And black corruption.
That's right, and black corruption.
Right, so Kwame Kilpatrick becomes the face of corruption, not the Wayne County.
Ficano, the
not
executive.
Ficano, right? It's Kilpatrick, right? And it becomes a lot easier to pass punitive legislation when you're symbolically attaching them to black bodies.
Right. And so what's the sort of solution? If you're a Detroiter, a black Detroiter, you've seen them now take out the unions, at least for the time being. I don't think that'll stand. I think in 2014 it'll probably go back the other way. But now the city is going to be managed. But if these are solutions, let's say the state fixes Detroit while it's in charge, is that okay? I mean, does that make it any better?
Well, Detroit's challenges are larger than fixes.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely
right. I mean, because any fixes that we have, tying back to the right to work stuff, any fixes that we have are going to significantly reduce the ability of labor unions in Detroit to bargain if they have any power at all.
That's right.
So and you still got the school problems. So what is going to have to happen somehow is going to have to be at least a 2 or 3 stage process. One stage is just a matter of creating spaces, to get them through this moment, right? To organize
short-term
in communities, whether you're talking about community gardens, I mean, all types of stuff. I mean, housing is still cheap. All types of stuff where people can organize around, organize to get through this space, right? The second thing is because there's a class dynamic in Detroit that we don't talk about because we talk about racism. We don't talk about the class dynamic within black communities. What working class black people have to do is begin to organize around and talk explicitly about what their interests are and get better representation within the city.
That's right.
To get that legislation passed or to get their interests met. And then the third thing, and this is going to be the toughest, and this goes back to the state, to the fact that the state is run by the Republicans, and a lot of that stuff, a lot of those local representatives, they represent constituents who are 90% white, 99, 95% white. Somebody's going to have to bridge that racial divide, right? Because the reality is that materially, poor people across the state are being really hit hard by
and they have far more in common than they
have apart. They have a great deal in common.
We don't seem to be able to get to the point where we can do that. And we have a mayor's race in Detroit in 2013. There's an opportunity there, candidates black or white, to try to start doing that.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
All right. Well, of course we're out of time. This goes so fast. We got to have you back next time you're in Detroit. Great guest. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
See you soon.
Go Blue.
Yeah, that's right. Go Blue. For more about Lester and his work, go to lesterspence.com. Our ABJ panel takes on 2012 when we return. Every year around this time, it's customary for the media to assemble a slideshow of sorts, highlighting all those big stories of the prior 12 months. No matter how hard we at ABJ tried to avoid that cliche, we couldn't help getting in on the tradition. So, to help comb through the complicated year that was 2012, we have Democratic activist and newly elected Wayne State Regent Kim Trent, and former state legislator and current judge of the 36th District Court, Bill McConico. Welcome back to ABJ. You guys are regulars.
Thank you.
You know the drill. So I want to start with what we saw with the NRA statement following the Connecticut shooting. I was absolutely floored by the tone, by the substance, and by the fact that, I'm not sure why, if you were going to have a press conference that you pumped up as some grand announcement, why would you come out and say the exact same thing you've been saying for 20 years?
I've been curious this whole week as someone who used to be a communications director. They have 7 days to come up with something brilliant to say about this because, I would be pulling my hair out trying to think of how you could justify their position.
Pivot, right?
How are you pivot? And they said the exact same things they've been saying, except even more obnoxiously than they've been saying over the years. And just to blame everything on the media and on, I mean, as if the problem has nothing to do with weapons.
Right.
Don't forget the political class and the president. You have to lay blame on them also.
Oh, right, because they definitely use a lot of coded language. Oh, well, the president has the Secret Service and they have guns. I was like, is this man?
He lost his mind.
What troubled me, even before the press conference, was that Republican lawmakers in D.C. were waiting.
Yeah.
They would not speak on a national crisis until this press conference. And what are we hearing now?
What are you gonna say?
You waited for this?
What are you going to say?
And I just find that the press conference could have been held in 94, 89, 88. They used movies from the early 90s, late 80s, and the anger.
Right, Adam Lincoln wasn't even born with some of the movies that they referenced.
What are you so angry about? And who's going after gun owners and hunters? No one is saying that. But you still have to explain to me why. And my father was a hunter. I grew up with guns in my house and them taking trips out west. Why do you need a 30-shot clip?
Yeah.
What hunter?
That's not even good for the sport.
Yeah,
I mean,
what
if you're talking about the sport
what hunter hunts with an assault rifle or a machine gun?
Yeah.
And so.
And this idea that the way you deal with gun violence at school is strapping everybody.
More
with
guns, right? More guns is the
kidding me?
answer.
So these teachers who've been vilified by these same folks for being greedy and all these other things that we've seen over the
Now you got to be strapped
Now you've also got to be Rambo in order to be an educator. I mean, it makes no sense.
I'm wondering, what do you think? This is, to me, a real clear test of the president's early footing in his second term, right? He came out and said, look, I want something done on this. I want it done quickly. I think what the NRA was saying was sort of a pushback, saying, well, you know what, I dare you. I dare you to do something.
It was a pushback, but you know what? The president is clear. He's drawing the line in the sand.
Sure.
Joe Biden is very clear. Now it's about the Republican Congress. Now.
Right. Can they stand up?
Now you've received your marching orders from the NRA, and then the people are over here. If you stand and say that we don't need to ban assault rifles and we don't need to ban large clips and we need to do nothing, it's very clear.
Well,
and
even 74% of
chosen.
NRA membership believe that there should be criminal background checks at gun shows.
For everything.
I mean,
For everything.
Who in the world could possibly justify that as a policy? Oh no, everyone should just get a gun. You get a gun. You get a gun. Who could, in 2012, after all the bloodshed that we've seen just this year alone?
Right.
Who could think that that's a good idea? If you're all for the rights of legal gun owners, why would you then defend people who aren't?
Right. Well, and that's always the thing. I'm glad that we sort of moved a little bit to the president, because I think that to me is one of the big stories of 2012. I have said a couple of times that it's just every day you sort of pinch yourself a little bit and say, we have a black man who has been elected not once but twice to be the leader of the free
under very
world.
trying circumstances.
Under very trying circumstances.
Over 50%
a white president.
With over 50% of the vote,
the
and not even
Democrat
close.
in
I mean, it's just sometimes you just sort of sit back and say, "Oh my gosh, this is progress." I mean, this is progress that we're living. But is that enough? I mean, what does he have to do?
You question, because he has momentum on so many issues. For example, on this gun issue, he has momentum. He had momentum, I think, with the fiscal cliff discussions. But there's this faction in Congress that no matter what the polls say, no matter what the people say, they are just going to be anti anything Barack Obama said.
But you know what, though? I think the national election showed that the Republican Party has moved so far that even moderates and moderate-leaning conservatives, that's not their party.
Right.
They can't identify with these people when they are saying that we won't raise taxes on anyone. You make $1 million, $5 million, we're saying no to this. We're saying no to any gun control. Anything the president says, we're going the opposite way. The country doesn't want that anymore. And the president, he's laying out where he's going. He has to stay there. The Democratic Party in the House and the Congress need to follow. No going on your own thing.
Right.
Just follow. And it's clear now. It's clear in the midterm elections, I believe this will be one of the first times that a second-term president that they pick up seats because this stuff is
even the Tea Party influence is already waning.
It's already waning. They did not do well in the elections.
What they did to the speaker this week, they said we have power within our own caucus when they said.
Well, and that's the real test: is can the Republicans get beyond that? I want to switch gears to another big story that was big early in the spring and seems to have sort of faded from the headlines. This Trayvon Martin killing in Florida, which everybody was outraged about, and especially African Americans. The circumstances there are really suspicious in terms of why this kid was even stopped or questioned by a civilian, no less. Why aren't we still jumping up and down about this? The trial's taking place in Florida, and people seem to have forgotten.
I mean, I think that race permeates everything in our culture, and early on this year, there was a tremendous amount of attention to the Trayvon Martin case. I think that because of all of the attention about, the gun issue right now, and that really ties into it too, with the whole stand your ground nonsense.
That's right.
Now would be the time for our civil rights organizations and others who really care about this issue to seize upon the moment and say, we can't have 300 million Americans standing their ground. Right. I mean, that's just not a way for a country to function. And, unfortunately, sadly, this case goes beyond just, those issues to the intersection of race and class and culture in our country, too.
But also, realistically, to have that type of focus and that type of attention, you're not going to be able to do that for a full year.
Sure.
You had a presidential election. You had the women's issues, women being under attack by the Republican Party. You had a lot of things that happened. Now was the time when you also had another African-American young man who was killed in Florida for playing loud music.
Significantly less attention.
No, I haven't seen any attention.
No one has gone crazy over
and so that it's almost like we put it out there, and it is going to take the trial. It is going to take the facts coming back out. I think people will be outraged again. And again, I think the presidential election really took the oxygen of most stories.
Sure.
But I think the outrage, when you hear those facts again, it'll come back out. And I obviously, as a sitting judge, I can't speak about the particulars of the case. But you'll have the media attention again. I don't doubt that it's going to come back.
Yeah.
But, a lot of the coded language that we saw even in the presidential campaign, was, I think a byproduct of Trayvon Martin, because you really got to see sort of the ugly side of our country and the fact that as far as we've come, and, of course we're, all celebrating the president's victory, not all of us, but, I am.
A lot of
Let me
people.
just speak for myself. But, I think we all celebrate as Americans what it signifies, But even with all that, we got to see that there's still, very serious
There's a lot of stuff that
divide
needs to be,
among Americans, especially as it relates to issues of crime, and even with marijuana being legalized and all that means, because that's largely in a lot of ways a racial issue too, in the way that it's prosecuted.
But the one thing I will say though is that, because it's the end of the year and we are trying to be optimistic and positive, the language in the presidential debate and the congressional races were beyond coded.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just absolute racism. It was absolute sexism.
Right.
But you know what? The Democrats did pick up seats in Congress. They picked up seats in the Senate.
Yeah.
The president won an overwhelming election, and I believe that it is going to motivated people. Voter suppression actually motivated people to come out.
People to go out and vote.
And I think all of those things, people are fighting back on. And I think it takes.
Now the playground is in the state.
Well, and
that's
a great.
On the state level,
that's a great.
We saw.
That's a great segue. We've got about 2 minutes left, but I want to talk about what we saw at the end of that legislative session, which was, the revenge of the GOP. You saw unbelievable stuff pass under very suspect circumstances. That was a pushback.
Stephen,
right?
I lived through 3 lame duck sessions in the legislature.
Right.
There was only one lame duck that was anywhere close to this. That was in 2002 when Governor Engler was going out.
Sure.
He, out of anger, vetoed DARTA. We had regional transportation passed in 2002.
Yeah, that's right.
I was a co-sponsor. Got rid of that. That was the first time Detroit's revenue sharing was cut. All types of things happened. But this is going to have to be a wake-up call for the Democratic Party. Now, we had a president elected overwhelmingly in our state. Debbie Stabenow was crushed her. But we lose 2 out of the 3 Supreme Court races.
Right.
We do not take over the state house. We lose all the ballot initiatives, and because of that, you have a right-to-work state now. You have attack on women's rights, reproductive rights. What are we going to do differently now? We see that they're acting out of anger, out of revenge, and it is now time for the Democratic Party to change things.
So what does the Democratic Party do?
I think the moment that legislation passed on right to work and all of that odious legislation that we saw, that was the beginning of the 2014 cycle.
Sure, right.
I mean, we have got to make sure that we have a strong candidate at the top of the ticket, that we are organized well, which of course one of the greatest tools that we have for organization is obviously organized labor.
Union,
so
sure, that's going to make it harder,
that
right?
was a very frankly, shrewd political calculation on the
But
other
they need
side.
to, but there needs to be different people at the table now, and
No,
there
I
has
agree
to
with that.
the smoke
You
filled
gotta
room needs to
broaden
grow
the-
now.
you gotta broaden the coalition.
And when you make a decision to go to put proposal 2 on the ballot,
The
you need
right
to know.
to collective
You
bargaining.
need to know that there may be pushback, and all those who made those
And there's
decisions.
consequences.
You know, let's where are the repercussions?
Right.
So.
Great to have you guys here. Happy 2013. It'll be a better year. It always is,
Absolutely.
right?
Thanks for having us.
That's
Steve.
right. Thanks to my guests, and thanks to you for joining us. We would love to hear what's on your mind, so connect with us on Facebook and continue the conversation. We'll see you next year on American Black Journal.
Lindsay wants to know,
So I'm curious, what's DTE Energy doing to improve their customer service?
why don't we take a ride over there and let Rachel tell us? Hello.
Hello. Take a walk with me. Here at DC Energy, we're working very hard to improve our service, like answering every call under 1 minute and resolving the issue on the first call.
Wow, no passing the buck, huh?
Nope. And plus, we're adding over 100 customer service jobs right here in the state of Michigan.
I need to get a real job.
I'm going to send your application.
Thanks, Rachel. DTE Energy. Know your own power.